Hello, welcome to my rat's nest. I think any pedalhead is familiar with this look of a rat's nest of cable everywhere, excuse me. um, Especially, if you haven't put together a pedal board and you're just experimenting with a new toy and you're trying out some different interesting configurations and you have to, you got this all over the floor and then you have to stand up and do something and you hope to God your toe doesn't catch one of the loops of cable and go sending stuff across the floor or pull connections out that you just spent time figuring out. But I'm up on the desktop here. Welcome to the inaugural episode here, and I wanted to cover a delay. I was a teenager in the 80s, so a child of the 70s and 80s, and I think that's when delay became affordable for your average musician or average player. I'm not going to call myself a musician, certainly not anymore. Before that, there were expensive tape units and some other things that could produce tape, but they were expensive and very mechanically temperamental. And then the solid state delays started coming out, where they're using bucket brigade chips, which are a series of on an integrated circuit, the little black blocks, a series of capacitors they could store a charge level and a signal level essentially, and like a bucket brigade, you'd feed it into the input, and your signal would go down the buckets and appear at the end, and that would create a time delay, which is what this does. This uses a quartet of Cool Logic 3208s, which is the Panasonic kind of made it the MN. It's a recreation of that. Those are 2048 stage delay chips. There's 4 of them in here, so you can get a longer delay time. More buckets takes longer to get through. So this one gets up to about 750 milliseconds. Oddly enough, it gets, I think, a little longer if you do a slow tap tempo test. Test. Yeah, that sounds longer. So just kind of a strange little quirk there. It's a fairly, this one came out in 2010, so it's got some modern features, and I think 2010 was one of those periods when analog had kind of a revival. Not that it ever went away, but kind of like True Bypass, there was a period of time when, it's got to be analog. There's kind of a purist thing, and I'm not knocking that. In fact, one of the instruments I'll be using today is an old Pro 1, Sequential Circuits Pro 1, which is an old analog synth I've had for, like 38 years. So it did, but it was a time when I think analog. So, the industry sort of supported that, or, if that's what you want, that, we'll give that to you with some modern features. The tap tempo is a fairly modern feature. Up top here, they have, they've got some modern controls. Up top, we've got the fairly traditional trio of controls, the blend, which is the mix between delay and the dry, your input signal, from no delay at all to half delay, the first delay, about 50-50 mix, to all delay. I'm right now speaking, so you're hearing my past. Yeah. It's really hard to talk with that delay on all the way dry. In fact, if I take off my headphones, I think I can talk better because I can't hear myself talk. So it just gives you a fully wet signal, which can be convenient, especially if you're routing things differently, like you might have your dry signal off on one amp and a wet signal all delay on another amp to create kind of a pseudo stereo field, or for whatever reason if you're doing different treatments. But the mix is a typical control. The other traditional one is the delay time control. Now, the delay time actually controls the clock, how fast things go through the bucket brigade. So as you, to change the time, instead of getting it from different buckets, which can be kind of a hassle with the wiring, they just speed up the delay time, and that has a couple of effects. You can get a slightly higher fidelity signal up top, maybe a little more high end, and like it just be a little tighter signal with less loss than down here. Just like a tape machine, where a faster tape will give you a higher fidelity than a slower tape speed. Of course, you'll burn up more tape. It also has an interesting side effect, which you've probably heard quite a bit, where if while something is being delayed, you slow down the speed, you'll get like slowing down a tape. Or the other way, where you can get this pitch to go up. And that has a practical side effect besides just making weird alien noises and things. Often you can, a delay can feel still, even an analog one can feel a little bit too even, a little bit too sterile, because the sound's very mechanically coming back reproduced. So what you can do though is if you add a little bit of wiggle to the delay time, just a little bit of wiggle, so that the repeats don't happen at exactly the same interval of time, and with the change in pitch, you get a little bit of a chorusing effect. In fact, a chorus is just a very short delay time that's modulated, that's wiggled, and to do that, they include an LFO, a low frequency oscillator, where we have a depth, how much knob turn is the wiggle, and how fast it is. So we can go from, this is no wiggle at all, this is a whole bunch of wiggle. That's a lot of wiggle. Or just someplace in the middle there where it's pleasant. From no wiggle, where it's kind of dry, we get kind of a chorusing effect. In fact, like I was saying, chorus and even flanging is the same effect. It's a delay. It's a delay that is just modulated a little bit, so the signal doesn't just sit right on top of itself completely evenly. A flange is very, very short delay time, and it creates a filtering effect because you're not changing more than really a couple of humps in the wave, so just a little bit off the wavelength, so that you get a lot of constructive and destructive filtering. Things don't line up quite right, evenly. So certain frequencies will be reinforced, other frequencies will be canceled out, phase cancellation, and that gives it that signature effect, which you can kind of hear a little bit in here if you. You get that kind of effect, and ooh, there we go. This isn't going to be particularly good at it because it needs to be extremely short, but that's how a flanger works. Chorus, the same thing. It's a little longer than a flanger, but it doesn't create really the same amount of filtering because you're more than a few lambda, more than a couple of wavelengths off, so that it sounds like two instruments that aren't like two strings on 12 string, two instruments, two vocalists, two strings, a chorus, which is why it's called a chorus, singing in, trying to sing in unison, but they're always a little bit off in time and a little bit off in frequency. Just that's how nature works, and so that's why it's a chorus. As we get into longer delay times, again, we're just doing that to give it some interest. This happens to allow you to do a triangle wave to get kind of that nice even effect, or a square wave, which bounces back and forth, bounces. So it's more of a stepwise motion, which I don't really find to be super particularly interesting, to be honest, or musically useful. I'm sure people do, but I think most people tend to stick near the more even triangle wave than the square wave or any kind of stepwise things. So rate and depth control the amount of wiggle. That's a modulation. You'll hear that called modulation, and that's called a low frequency oscillator that does that modulates, it oscillates back and forth and creates that. The other control here is a gain control. It is a just sort of a utility control. It's nice to have. It just allows you to match your, it's a preamp on the input stage and just allows you to kind of level match between your dry signal and what's, how the echo box is doing with that. So it's just a level control to, well, it does a lot, to just kind of match things or unmatch things just to set the level that you want. But it's convenient, but it is just a little tuning control. As far as the sort of more advanced features, this does allow for control with an expression pedal, which is, kind of like, it feels like a volume pedal, but allows you to control different things. I find there's two basic approaches these days to an expression pedal. This one uses kind of the more basic system, which is you can set a parameter, or rate of how fast something wiggles. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Hello. 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 Or you can set the depth of the wiggle so you can have a fairly even sound and then just kind of fade it in. Hello. And then maybe not so much. Then a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So that can be convenient to bring in kind of a little chorusy type effect. The feedback, so you can, that's actually a fairly useful one. So you can have just one echo, but then bring in more as you need it. And bring it back. Bring it back. Bring it back. And I don't know if my apologies, I may have been remiss being new to video. I don't know if I covered the feedback control. The feedback control, also you'll see it sometimes listed as repeats or anything like that. Basically, as the input comes through, gets time delayed and comes out as a time delayed echo, the feedback control literally takes some of that signal and injects it back in the input. So instead of a single repeat, you get more repeats as the echo recycles through. So you'll also see called regeneration. So that's what that does. My apologies. Now, an interesting thing about that is as you get more echoes, it can get wildly out of control. If you really get it going, it can be a bit of a speaker buster. This one, what happens is if you send the feedback signal at a gain greater than 1, which means it's slightly louder than the input, than the original, then it'll just grow into a real loud thing. And some units will do that, and it just turns into a runaway mess. And you kind of got to run over there and panic and try to hit buttons and get out of it, and before you blow a speaker or something. This one seems pretty well behaved. I don't know if they have a limit on it to keep it from going crazy, or if it's just a really well-tuned feedback loop. But it will go, but it doesn't go completely out of control. So it seems pretty well behaved, which is nice because you get those kinds of effects of just a degradation into a muss without it just blowing your speakers up. So that's what the feedback control is. Or I can control the delay time. Now, this is a pretty primitive, basic way of doing things because what happens is the foot pedal essentially starts back here at 0, and then foot 4 goes to whatever the maximum time of the associated knob is. The other method of doing things is, you may have seen on some more modern, more digitally controlled things, you get toe up way back here, and you set all your knobs, and the machine memorizes the position of those knobs, and there's usually a button or something to hit. Then you go forward, and you set the knobs for the toe down, the fully forward way, and the machine memorizes that settings. And when you go back and forth, it's like turning all the knobs at once from the A setting with your toe back to the B setting with your toe forward, which is a really nice way of doing it. And I think it's really good for delay, because you might do something like, I think it's really common to do almost a fugue or canon in a box, where you have maybe, say, one repeat at a delay time at about 50-50, so that it creates kind of a doubling effect, like rounds, like musical rounds, where you get a kind of a that kind of thing. And just one or two delays are good for that. But then you might go into something more atmospheric, where I find the more repeats you have, it will get mushy. If you have a whole bunch of repeats, you'll get very mushy with it. So you have a... Still a nice effect, but it can be a bit much. So you may want to roll back the volume, or excuse me, the blend. So you get almost more of a cave-like reverb out of it. And I find that being able to move between that, where maybe you have, as you get more and more feedback or more echoes, you may want to bring the mix down so that everything doesn't become muddy. It's very similar to, like, sometimes if you have the decay of a reverb way up, so that the reverb lasts a long time, you may want to bring down the blend so that it just doesn't become a big mush. Same thing here. This doesn't allow it. It just has the one single parameter. Still useful, but I think the other system is just kind of a more advanced system, which, is nice. The more advanced system, I think, is really useful. But, this is totally serviceable. Now, I noticed that the expression mode here they have a secret little feature, a sub-feature, and that is, if you hold down the expression mode for about 2 seconds, all the lights light up, and the rate control becomes a high-pass filter. The reason is delays can sound kind of muddy, especially as you have more echoes. But what they did is they added a high-pass filter, a low-cut filter, which you can control here to kind of even things out. So, as you can hear now, I don't get that muddy rumble. It's you see that the low cut on some preamps and things, just to kill the rumble from subsonic frequencies. This is similar. It kind of gives the illusion of higher fidelity by it doesn't really let any extra high frequencies through, but what it does is it doesn't cover the high frequencies that still exist with a low frequency, it doesn't cover it up with low frequency content, so you can pop. It adds clarity, but a lot like any kind of filter, like you filter in photography, you're taking away things. So if you notice, when I have that filter really killing the low end, it also really interferes with the feedback loop. There's just not that much signal to feed back. Test. So quite a bit of difference there, though it is useful. It's kind of a tuning effect. I mean, you can do some special effects with it, but it's a tuning effect. I think, though, the belle of the ball here. Now, it's something that happened with early delays, where they're more like these kind of signal, studio signal processors, and it went away when pedals got kind of compact. was, what if I have an effects loop in the feedback path, in the regeneration path? So as the echoes go, I can add effects to the echo to change things, and change how the reverb, or excuse me, how the delay decays. And this one, they brought that back, so that's really nice to see, because for a number of years, that was one that you kind of could do outboard, but you had to run a mixer and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's just nice that they put that back in. And that's where I think you can really alter the character of a delay, especially the analog delays. Really the analog delays aren't that great at echoing. Kind of funny. But what they do is they have a really specific character. It's I think a lot like a spring reverb. A spring reverb, was originally a inexpensive way of simulating room reverb, but it wasn't very good at that. But it was a sound, but it became a sound of its own. The sound of surf and whatnot, the drippy sound. So it's kind of sought over after, while it was trying to be a natural reverb, it didn't do a very good job. But that not very good job sounds great. And I find the same thing with the analog delay. It's kind of that atmospheric sound, and adding something into the feedback loop can really alter the character. For instance, here I have a wah-wah pedal. It does have an overdrive built in, but I'm going to just do the wah-wah for a second. Again, I'm going to use the voice because it kind of lets you hear what's going on. And right now I don't have it on at all, but when I turn it on, things happen. Things happen. Things happen. Things happen. Things happen. I can get some stuff out. Ooh, I can't even throat sing. And again, I can kind of trim that out with that extra little filter they have on there, the high pass filter, so I can get some different sounds, some thin sounds as opposed to just that mush. Test, test, test. And there that is. So and you can really, if you're playing with that runaway feedback like people like, you can really tune it with a wah-wah pedal. Add a little overdrive. Test. Adding overdrive. Change the character. You can change the character of this wah-wah pedal has kind of a talk box too, which is a dual filter. So that's the kind of things I can do with that. I'm going to put on a little, let me shut down the mic for a second, and I'll just run a little sequence on this old sequential circuits here. And you can stop listening to me babble and just kind of hear some things. That's the kind of thing you can do with a feedback loop. And it's dry, it would just be that. And then just the delay itself, no wah-wah anymore or anything like that. Ooh, it's going to go out of control. Let's not do anything because it's not on. But they seem to have almost a ducking. It's not really a ducking, but they, I will say for an analog delay, it is tuned pretty well in terms of the feedback is well behaved. But that's the kind of sounds you can get with the Deluxe Memory Boy, kind of some basic doubling and just kind of some atmospheric stuff. At first it may not seem that dramatic. As you can tell from an analog delay, especially the attack on an instrument is very rounded off. So it kind of creates that atmospheric effect, which is actually can be really nice because, that's one thing often a digital delay will have tone controls and filters because a straight ping, 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 ping can get about as annoying as it's about to get if I go ping, 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 ping some more. So, it's one of those things with, I think, a lot of these sorts of effects. If you set it to the gee whiz thing, like you may have done that with the regen and stuff feedback, actually on a flanger, where it gets really like jet engine-y. It's cool for about 2 minutes, but then it starts wearing the ear out. So often I find with an effect, get a gee whiz sound, then back it off, maybe set, to about 70% of that, and you get better off. So, working with an analog delay is a lot like that, kind of already inbuilt, in that it's sort of atmospheric, it's sort of a smoothing out thing. You can kind of use it almost as a pseudo reverb to give things some space, a little bit of a call and response kind of thing, those kinds of things. But overall, it's, what do I think of the Memory Boy? It's a product of the time. If that's, if you're really a delay purist, it's fine. I think there's things on the market that are doing this and more. To be honest, the primitive expression mode, I would prefer to see the multi-parameter mode. Maybe clean up things, maybe work on the filtering a little bit so you can get maybe a little more clarity. Often even when the delay time is small, so the sound is ripping through, often they'll have a filter to keep clock noise or things from going through. So there's just a ceiling to the amount of high end you can get through one of these things. And there's some tricks that have been used, compansion and pre-emphasis, where they'll pre-emphasize, really crank, like put a high end EQ, put out, excuse me, high, when I say high, not high value, but really boost the treble frequencies up. And then when you feed it, when you feed the signal through, you can try to round up, bring those treble frequencies down. The idea is you'll get rid of some noise and hiss and things, but you also have, but when you bring it down, you have enough pre-emphasis where there's still high end from the signal that you want in there. So that's just kind of a matter of tuning. So I think it's a good solid pedal. It's, and if you're kind of into the atmosphere of things and want to sit there with a wah-wah pedal and just kind of zone out, or try different effects. If you want to get real ambient, then you can certainly do that. So it is what it is. What it is. It's got, I think, a host of features, but I think it's a solid value, but I don't think it's stellar. It's a little bit of a two-trick pony, I would say, at this point, at this day and age. Again, if you're into the analog purist thing, by all means. But I've had a lot of delays, and so I think there's things in this market space that can do a lot more. And I think most people, would be happier with a different unit. But if you can get one at a reasonable price, they are solidly built and they are good units. Well, hey, thanks for listening to the inaugural session here of what I'm doing. I know I ramble a little bit, but it's been wonderful having you here. Take care.